And Adam, if you can make me a co-host, that would be great.
Should be good now.
Okay. Are we good on the live stream?
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Hi, everybody. Happy Thursday. Happy almost Thanksgiving. Hope you guys are looking forward to a nice, yummy food-filled week next week. Welcome Energy Code Board meeting number 20. And we've got a big agenda today, as we always do. So we're going to go ahead and get started. But before we get started, I asked Adam to give an update to the board on the current open positions that we have on the board. The applications just went out for those DOLA, those that will be appointed by DOLA. And then Adam, you can give the details for those that will be appointed by CEO. But we figured we would start there as a quick update for everyone.
Yeah, so I think everyone's aware that we have a few vacancies at the moment, 5, unfortunately, right now, but we are working on filling them and going to get them filled very soon. So one of those is appointed by CEO. That's the utility representative seat. So that is any person who works for or otherwise represents an investor-owned utility or a municipal or cooperative utility. That is open for applications for anyone who's interested until Monday at the end of the day, Monday at 5 p.m. Monday the 26th. And then there are 4 seats that will be appointed by DOLA. So those seats are the rural county representative seat, the affordable housing representative it's a for-profit or nonprofit for rent builders. It's kind of a complicated thing in statute. And then we have one of our MEP, mechanical, electrical, plumbing professional openings. And then finally, we have the building operations expert. So those are the 4 positions that DOLA has the authority for appointment over. And those applications were opened up, I believe, yesterday, and they close on December 2nd. So a fairly quick turnaround and over the holidays. So if you know folks who are in the affordable housing space or the MEP space or the building operations space or rural county representatives that you would like to encourage to apply for the board, they need to apply by December 2nd. So utility representative has to apply by this coming Monday, the 26th. All the others by Monday, the 2nd, December 2nd.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam. So what we can do is after this meeting today, I can forward you guys that message from Mo. So everybody's got it. So if you want to get any emails out to folks you'd like to invite to apply before the end of the week, we can do that. Any questions before we jump in? All right. I'm not seeing any. Okay. So our objectives for the meeting today are to wrap up the proposals on the commercial requirements in the Model Electric and Solar Ready Code. There's just 2 left that we want to talk through, and then we will start to review the proposals for the draft number 1 of the commercial code. So what that's going to look like on our agenda, we'll spend the first 20-30 minutes or so on that commercial model code discussion. And then as you can see here, we've got proposals for C401, C402, C404, 405, 406, and 503. The one commercial section that we are not going to cover on today's agenda is section C407. And that is because we're going to push that out to a later date because we think that'll be a bigger conversation. So we'll try to get through most of our commercial code proposals today. And anything as we've been doing that doesn't land on today's meeting, we will push to our meeting on December 12th. So to start the meeting, I would just love if you guys all want to open up the commercial code proposals or the commercial code draft proposals document that I sent out to everybody as pre-work. Have that up on your computer so you can reference it as we go through today. That'll probably help you guys' recall and just remembering what was proposed and how you feel about it. As always, a reminder on public comment. These come in often, and I think we actually got a couple after our last meeting before I sent the last agenda out. So just a reminder to continually be checking in on those and seeing what the public has to say as we go through this process. Alrighty. we're going to move to approving the meeting minutes from meeting 19. So do I have a motion from a board member to approve meeting minutes?
Just Kevin approved to move the move to approve the minutes. Guess I shouldn't have done that one.
I'll second.
Thanks, Ron. Thank you, Kevin. All in favor of approving the meeting minutes from meeting 19, please say aye.
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 And any opposed to approving the meeting minutes from meeting 19, please say nay. Okay, meeting minutes from meeting 19 are approved, and we will get those up on CEO's website shortly. All right, into the commercial model code discussion. So starting out, we have thanks. Well, we have two proposals for folks. The first is a follow-up from our last conversation in meeting 19 about commercial electric vehicle readiness from Kevin. And I'll give you a moment to share this in a second, Kevin. And then our second one is from Carolyn on solar readiness. So we'll continue to try to keep to our 7 minutes per proposal structure. And Kevin, I'll pass it over to you to present on how you were thinking. And I guess maybe before, Kevin, I actually pass it to you, I just want to remind the board that the last vote we took on meeting 19 was to allow some amount of level 1 charging to replace some amount of level 2 charging. And the board voted it to approve us moving forward with this conversation. And so we worked with Kevin offline to think about what that could look like. And so just a reminder from that last conversation. So Kevin, sorry, over to you.
Great. No, that's perfect, Kim. Thanks so much. And I think we covered most of the intro of this last time around in terms of what the intent was. This came from both a public comment and a public proposal, a code proposal. And I don't remember the numbers of them right now, and I don't think we need to pull them up again, but effectively it was advocating that the way the voltage and amperage requirements are listed right now in the model solar and electric ready codes is that it sort of limits the implementation of EV spaces, charging spaces to level 2 type chargers. And the heart of the inquiry or the request to change that or add this component to was for R2 occupancies where people are more likely to have their cars plugged in for a longer period of time. The level 1 charger could be sufficient for those uses. And might be better from a parking and demand management point of view as well. And they also have the benefit of being substantially less expensive. So the advocacy was that having those available was a benefit. It might actually allow developers to do some more charging than is allowed by code. So that was the reason they said you could take one of those required level 2 charging spaces for EV ready or EVSE spaces and change that to basically a kind of a conventional outlet like you would have in your garage for an electric vehicle. And we decided to put a limit on that of 50%. So you could only change out 50% of those spaces so that the faster charging spaces were still in plenty of numbers. And then we suggested a 3-to-1 ratio for that, since that was some of the intent of the proposal was to allow for there to be more spaces than the code minimum would have.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. And before I open it up to questions, we did put together a couple slides to just demonstrate numerically what this would do to impact the parking minimums. So this is the current model code. We use an example lot of 100 spaces to keep things very clean and easy for us. And this is again an R2 lot. So this is currently how the model code breaks it down. EVSE installed is 5%, EV ready is 15, EV capable is 10, and EV capable light is 30%. So those numbers match very cleanly in a 100 space lot to a total of 60 spaces covered. This is what it would look like if we do that, the sort of 3-to-1, 50% of level 2 spaces are swapped out for level 1, and we do the 3-to-1 ratio. So I'm going to walk through each of these bullets to help explain the math that you'll see in the table. So one thing that we wanted to note is that EV readiness requires a plug and pre-wiring for EV charging. And Adam, I might let you elaborate on this note if folks have questions, but level 1 chargers are pretty much just a wall plug. And so the thinking here is that sort of an EV ready is almost like an EV space for these level 1 chargers. So just something to keep in mind. So let's see, if we took 1/2 of the EV SE spaces, installed spaces, and said that those are going to go down to a level 1. We divided by 2, and we just assumed a rounding down because I believe that's how it's structured in the model code. So we would end up with 3 of our 5 spaces being level 2 and 2 needing to be converted to level 1. So because of the 3-to-1 ratio, we would take those 2 spaces, we would multiply it by 3, and we would get 6 total level 1 spaces. Then we would look at the EV ready spaces, same math. We're going to take our EV ready required, let's just go back, was 15 required. So half of those spaces rounded down would go to level 1, the other half would go to level 2. So we'd have 8 spaces for level 2. We'd have 7 spaces remaining that could be level 1 that would need to follow the 3-to-1 ratio. So it would be 7 times 3. That's 21 spaces would be level 1. So this is where we would land as far as total space types. On the EV SE installed, we'd have 6 level 1s, 3 level 2s. On EV readiness, we'd have 21 level 1s, 8 level 2s, and then EV capable and EV capable light would be kept consistent. And that equals a total coverage of 78 spaces.
And maybe I didn't mention, but this is intended to be optional, not required, right? So if it feels like the math gets a little wonky and confusing through there, this is not a requirement, or that was my intention, Kim. I'm not sure if we've written it quite that way yet. Yeah.
Thanks, Kevin, for clarifying that. I think that was my understanding as well, but it's good to state that this would be optional, and also that the 50% would be the maximum. So this will be the maximum swap out that somebody could do. Someone could choose to change it up to 50% of their level 2 spaces, which would math differently than what we've got here. So with that, comments, questions, thoughts from the board. I also put together a slide for a 2-to-1 ratio in case folks want to explore that route. So it's ready for us if you guys want to see that math too. So we'll go to Tim and then we'll go to Jess.
Yeah, thanks. Just for clarity, I may have misheard about just like the electrical requirements, like just a regular plug. But so an EVSE requires at least 30 amp breaker, and plus, the equipment ready to plug in. EV ready is the 40 amp, and same thing on like EV capable. So those are the differences, at least from the electrical capacity. Is that all figured in with how these numbers are going to work? Or because they're not just a standard 20 amp circuit. Now, I don't know if that makes any difference. I just wanted to throw that on the table.
Tim, yeah, go for it, Adam.
I was just going to say, I think we would probably have to add in a definition or a section that would address level 1 charging so that folks would know that the amperage and voltage requirements are lower for those types of spaces. So if this was approved, well, frankly, whether this is approved or whatever is approved to allow level 1, we'll have to include those details in there to make the difference clear.
Perfect. Now that answers my question. That was kind of,
and in a way, that's like some of the cost savings thing that they were trying to advance, was that this would, and that's why we went from 2 to 3 actually, so that it wasn't like we weren't allowing this for a way for people to find a workaround, right? So that's some of the intent.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Kevin. Jess?
Thank you for putting that sample together. I like that this covers more spaces overall. I really appreciate that. I have a concern as an EV driver. So I actually had to go to Edwards this morning for a doctor's appointment, and it's a 60-mile drive from Breckenridge. I mean, this is very personal, but just by way of context. And it was cold, so much as I try not to use my heater in my car, I did. And it used 50% of my battery to go down and back. So I'm at home right now. I need to charge. I have about 100 miles of range right now. And so I was doing the math and thinking, like, if I'm in an EV driver and I live in a multifamily building with this kind of situation, I won't be able to recoup. And I only charge to 80% usually. I won't be able to get to 80% overnight. Like if I charge for 12 hours, I'll get about 60 miles of range. I can get to work tomorrow, but it's going to require me to have to plug in a lot more than I would if I had a level 2 charger. So I really do appreciate this from a developer and cost savings point of view. I think from a driver point of view, I would only use that level 1 as a last resort. And I would always try to use a level 2 charger if it were available to me.
Thanks, Jess. Elizabeth.
Yeah, I can chime in with a similar experience. I'm also an EV driver, and all I have is a level 1 charger. That's all I've got at my house because I've maxed out my electric service. So that's how I function. And it is difficult because and I don't drive very much, so this works for me. But on those days, where I have days like Jess had, I do have to plan to charge if I'm out and about. But let us all remember that's what we used to do with internal combustion engines. We would go get gas. So that's not the end of the world. And I've been able to function like that for 2 years. And it does take a little more planning than if you just charge at home, which is incredibly convenient. But I've also only had to do it less than 10 times in 2 years. Now I don't drive 20 miles a day, typically if I'm, there and back with kids for school or whatever, I can charge enough in 8 hours to function, because that gives me, 30 to 40 miles an hour, 30 to 40 miles of range, I should say, charging overnight. So it is functional. It is not enough if you drive 50 miles a day or 60 miles a day. But again, we used to have to stop for gas too. So it's just a little bit different, but it can be doable. I would support this as someone who has been able to survive with a level 1 charger. Thank you.
Not weighing in on whether it's good or bad, but I just also want to note too, just a reminder that this is not replacing all level 2 spaces either. There would still be some level 2 spaces in the parking lot regardless of the situation. So just pointing that out for folks.
Yeah, and that's a key reason for having that 50% as well, so that the amount of those aren't diminished.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Tim?
Yeah, one question from where this idea came from. I know, Kevin, you're proposing it. Was this brought forward through a public comment, and would be the intent? Okay, I see that, Adam. Yeah. And was the intent there to save the developers money on the electrical capacity, other than maybe saying we're going to be providing more spaces, or both?
And I don't have the text up. I should have pulled it up, but my recollection was it was in support of having more spaces overall, and that they were used. It wasn't like, hey, this is going to be cheaper. It's saying you could do more of this less expensive space type if you allowed this exception.
And sorry, Kevin, this is an option, correct?
Correct. Yep, it's an option.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
you could still do what the previous code, what the code says now. Another thing I think, Tim, one of the things the public comment also was addressing was the impact on the grid as we start building out a lot more. EVs become more significant, as the maximum load draw on the grid would be much lower if you have a bunch of vehicles plugged in at a level 1 charger instead of a bunch of vehicles plugged in at level 2. So for those who are able to charge maybe for anywhere from 12 to 48 hours without moving their vehicle, that it would be a more stable impact on the grid as well, was one of the motivations.
Thanks, Adam.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm sorry. So,
no, please go ahead.
wait, just a quick second question with that. This would not impact the separate requirement for the EV ready space inside of each garage, attached garage. Because that's not in the table. It's up in a different section that we added.
Correct. So this would only apply to the R2, the line item in the table that's R2 greater than 10 spaces lots.
Good. Thank you.
Okay. Kim.
I appreciate the intent of this proposal, and I guess my question is just thinking for future, as more and more vehicles become electric, and a lot of people probably cannot navigate their lives quite as well with a level 1 charger. I'm just curious what the relationship would be or is between this type of option and the overall capacity of the electric panels in the building to accept level 2 chargers as a future renovation. And if there's significant cost involved in doing that renovation in addition to change a level 1 over to a level 2.
We don't have an electrical engineer on the board anymore, do we?
Well, our electrician, who is Zach, is not in attendance today, unfortunately.
Yeah, shoot.
Sorry, Kim, that would be a great question for him. And Elizabeth, I don't know if you have an answer to that.
Only my own personal experience at my house, since I would like to do this and can't. It's a lot. I would have to run because again, I'm running off 120 volt outlet, literally like the plug I have in my garage. It's nothing special. It's a 20 amp circuit. It's, the lower gauge 20 amp run wire. If I was to change that to a 30 amp, I basically have to start over. I have to run new wire. I have to put in a different plug. I could conceivably, if I had conduit, I could use the same conduit, but that's it. It's a different, shaped plug, 30 amp plug.
Yeah, you'd have to combine two at the panel.
Yes, and I would need a double pole at the panel.
Yeah,
it's not just the panel capacity that would be needed, but also then the wiring and then the plug. It's everything.
At least in my case, yes.
Yeah, in all cases, you'd have to pull a gauge appropriate for the amperage, and you need to substitute 2 existing 120 circuits for an appropriately sized 220.
A lot of times on the older houses that they have 150 amp panel boards as compared to what we see now all the time, 200 amp panels. That's
Right.
where we've seen in Broomfield issues with trying to upgrade or install the level 2s in the garages. That's where we come up to where the panels then oversized with that additional load. And then that requires a sub panel, and that the cost starts to go up quite a bit there. But we see people paying for that because that's what they want.
Yeah, in this scenario, the service capacity would be there because you'd be going back, you'd be taking 2 previously allocated 120s and converting. The principal cost you would run into is that replacement of the wire and the circuit breaker in this case. So the wire's quite expensive. I'll just, like on a residential house, it's roughly 800 to where you have the service capacity and you need to just add a new circuit breaker and run new wire. That's my example from having done it. Where you aren't service constrained, and in this case, I'm assuming we would not be service constrained.
That helps me understand what I need to do for my own house, which I think I have a 90 amp panel, so it's even less. But I guess that would be my concern about this, because it would be that much more of a challenge on a commercial building with that many more spaces to have to retrofit.
Okay. Thanks,
I
Kim.
suppose that not to put me devil's advocate or be contrary to that. I appreciate the point, Kim, for sure. I do wonder if the development of batteries and technology and charging and all of that might evolve to the point where level 1 is more common and is quicker and all of that, so that the retrofit might not be there. It's a little bit of crystal ball work with this for sure.
It's more likely to go the other way, that the cars are going to have bigger batteries with longer ranges and need more power.
Yeah.
I'll just say again, we all used to go get gas too.
Yeah, I mean, I think the real change in society, I think that would change the equation would be, what is the availability in the public sphere for level 3 chargers? Then you can stop and get power similar to the way we get gas, meaning that you can pull in and in 15 minutes get a tank of gas.
Yeah.
That's really the game changer. The thing about this though is what we're talking about is this trading of level 1 versus level 2. I think that the total amount of power delivered to a particular building is going to be relatively similar, because again, we're trading one thing for another. So it's really just a matter of, do we get more spaces that are level 1 versus fewer spaces that are level 2? I think that's what this proposal is talking about. And I think that's an interesting balance, but I don't think it really changes anything in terms of what is the total panel size or current draw on the building.
Okay, thanks, Ron. So some really good thoughts out there from the board. So what Adam and I did for this proposal is we broke it into two. So we broke this into two straw polls. The first would be to set the ratio, the 1-to-3 ratio that Kevin proposed. And then the second is to limit to set the percentage of space types that could be swapped. You guys are all it sounds like no one's suggesting anything different from Kevin's proposal. And so we could just kind of do a thumbs up, thumbs down on Kevin's proposal, if that sounds appropriate to everybody, rather than doing the two for questions.
And just to summarize what you're suggesting, so the proposal is saying that 50% of the spaces can be converted to level 1 charging, and you have to put in 3 level 1s for each level 2 that you're swapping.
That's correct. And that this
correct.
proposal is focused on just the EVSE spaces and the EV ready spaces.
And I admit that was kind of a late night and not extensively researched change, but what I was trying to avoid was what somebody else's question was can people do this just to cheap it out? And I don't think the 3 level 1s are going to equate to a level 2 necessarily, but it might have been that 2 would not. So that was not vetted research as to why. It was kind of a hunch, I have to admit.
Okay. So maybe since we've got the slides built, we'll just go forth with these two questions, if that sounds okay. So these spaces, all of this proposal will come together just to look at the EVSE spaces and the EV ready spaces. The 2-to-1 ratio, I might just actually take that out since it's not really on the table since. Well, actually, maybe Adam, I'm going to change my mind. I think I'm just going to ask about Kevin's proposal because that seems like the most straightforward way to do this. Tim, did you have a thought while I edit this slide?
Yeah, and just, Ron made the clarification just to summarize what we were doing, but the discussion is to clarify, in my opinion, that this is a voluntary option, so to speak, when we vote. Can we do that to keep that specifically in there? Thanks.
Yep. Are 2 lots with greater than 10 spaces to substitute level 1 charging spaces. Sorry, team, let me just write this really quick. EV.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to write it out carefully, and also just to be clear that the ratio we're talking about is 1 level 2 can be replaced with
3 level 1s.
3 level 1s, right? Just because I don't want anyone to be confused about what the ratio means.
1-to-3 ratio. Is that right? The way that is.
All of those are questions that end in periods. Yes, that's right.
Okay, I just want to make sure the ratio is in the right order. Not a math expert here. Just gotta keep consistent here. Okay. So, and this is just going to be yes, no. Okay, so would the board like to accept Kevin's proposal? This is to add an option for commercial EV readiness for R2 lots with greater than 10 spaces to substitute level 2 EVSE spaces and EV ready spaces with an level 1 space on a 1-to-3 ratio. Or is it 3-to-1? 1-to-3? That sounds right?
Yeah,
I think that's right. Okay.
No
No more than 50% of level 2 EVSE and EV ready spaces can be swapped out for a level 1 spaces. I'm not hearing that I did that wrong, so we're gonna say that we did it right. We'll do a straw poll. Okay, so those in favor, option A is a vote yes, option B is a vote no, and option C is a vote abstain. So if you'd like to vote yes on this proposal, please raise your hand now. All right, thanks, guys. I see 10 hands in support of option A. You can lower your hands. And if you would like to vote no on this proposal, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 0 votes for option B. If you would like to abstain from voting on this proposal, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 1 abstain. All right, so that is a majority, so that passes. And so we will accept that proposal. Thank you, Kevin, for bringing that forward to the board.
Thanks for the quick slide work, Kim.
You got it. All right, oops, that's the wrong button. Okay. Carolyn, I'm going to pass it over to you to talk through the solar readiness proposal.
Great, thank you. So I just brought this up because as I think we've shared, Boulder just went through the process of updating our energy conservation code, and during our engagement around our code update, we got feedback through a couple of channels around the current language in terms of the minimum size of the solar ready zone. And so these were these dimensions here that I brought forward were the ones that were recommended back to us based on the orientation of solar panels and what would be recommended. And so just given that feedback, and that we heard, really the what we had previously been using is not necessarily going to accommodate solar in the way we were intending. I would just recommend we carry this forward into the commercial section of the state too, since Boulder's solar ready zone dimensions were what we used for the original solar ready requirements.
Thanks, Carolyn. And I'm just going to move to the next slide where we've got the current language down here and then the Boulder language up top, so you guys can see them side by side. And then any comments, questions, thoughts from the board?
Yeah, and maybe a little addition to that. I think some of the feedback we just got was around, I think the 5 feet current zone is effectively a single panel size, and when you take into account any kind of racking, wiring, and other things, like effectively it doesn't even fit a single panel. That was some of the feedback, and so that's where the recommendations around the dimensions I put here forward, which is the 11 feet and just some of those additional context. That's where that feedback came from. So yeah, the 15 feet minimum running length, and yeah.
Yeah, Adam, go for it.
I just have a question. So Carolyn, just to be clear, all you're advocating for changing in our code is the minimum dimensions. You're not necessarily advocating to change the 40% area or anything.
Nope, just the dimensions, just the minimum dimensions of the contiguous, because we allow for the solar zone to be broken up into multiple spaces, but we set a minimum size of any given space to ensure that you can place solar there, and so it's just the dimensions of that minimum if you're breaking up the area.
Right. I just wanted to confirm, because what was on the screen also includes the size, and I just want to make sure we're not trying to touch that.
Correct. Yeah, no change to the size, only the very clearly we just want to change the minimum dimensions if you are not placing the solar ready zone in one single spot. Tim?
Yeah, so this, Carolyn, would basically just delete the last sentence of CS 402.3, which is that 5-foot rule, and then insert these new numbers. Is that
Correct?
We would see?
Correct.
And that was feedback that you got from solar companies?
It was a broad, actually, stakeholder conversation with both building owners, solar companies. Yeah.
Okay.
And was positively received when we made the change. So.
Yeah, great. I'm all in on that to be doing the research for us.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. And thanks for clarifying that, those pieces of this proposal, Carolyn. Any other comments or questions? Not seeing any hands, I think we could advance to our straw poll. So does the board want to add in the Boulder approach to solar ready sizing? So again, it's swapping out those last sentences, and Carolyn will make sure to work with you offline to make sure it's captured correctly. Vote for option A is yes, vote for option B is no, and vote for option C is abstain. So board members in favor would like to vote for option A, yes, please raise your hand. All right, usually I've got a little, where's my little counter? There it is, 12 hands. Okay, great, thanks guys, you can lower your hands. Or I think that was 11 hands for, I'm sorry, that was 11 for option A, not 12. My eyes played a trick on me for a moment. Okay, any board members that would like to vote against this proposal? Option B, please raise your hand. Okay, no votes for option B. Anyone who would like to abstain from this vote, please raise your hand. Okay, no votes for option C. So this passes with the majority vote. Great. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Carolyn, for that proposal. All right, so now we are going to switch gears in our brain. So everybody, we are going to start talking about the board proposals to change the first commercial code draft for the low energy and carbon code. So no longer talking about the model electric solar ready code. We are into talking about the commercial code for the low energy carbon code. So we're going to start with C401 and go through all those categories that we talked about. The first one is more of a general recommendation that Adam caught when he was writing the code language. And so, Adam, I'm going to pass it over to you to share your thoughts on this proposal.
Yeah, so this is something that was just raised to us, I mean, I guess on multiple fronts, actually. And I don't want to necessarily say it's a proposal from CEO per se, but I just wanted to bring it up because I think it's very relevant in that the commercial provisions of the IECC essentially allow a complete alternative approach to use ASHRAE 90.1. You basically just switch over to 90.1. You don't have to do anything in the IECC, and you can basically just comply with 90.1, and that's in compliance with the commercial code of the IECC. And so the concern here is that obviously all the modifications we are making to the code for the state are to the IECC and are not to ASHRAE 90.1. And so I think the thing that has been raised, or the potential issue that has been raised here, is that if none of the intended outcomes that this board has tried to make through modifying the IECC are reflected in ASHRAE 90.1, that essentially gives a project full carte blanche to ignore everything we wanted as a board for the minimum requirements for Colorado and just do what's in 90.1 instead. And so the proposal, I guess, is to remove the alternative allowance for 90.1, recognizing that Appendix G of 90.1 is still the foundation by which we are modifying Section C407, which we will talk about at a later time. But other than that, this would not allow 90.1 as an alternative compliance pathway for those reasons. This has been done in Denver. Denver removed 90.1 as an alternative. Carolyn, correct me if I'm wrong. I think Boulder did as well. And so just noting that it's not unprecedented for that option to have occurred in locally adopted codes already.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam. Thoughts, questions, comments from the board? Yeah, Tim.
I had some other questions, but I was not aware that Denver, and now was that with Carolyn just recently with the updated code that you just went through, removing the ASHRAE 90.1?
I'm going to have to go and double check and make sure we did. Adam just flagged me. I'm trying to remember how, because we didn't exactly adopt the code as the 2024 IECC. We do reference ASHRAE appendix, the G. That's, I believe, the only one, but I'd have to confirm that.
Yeah, I can chime in on that. Boulder's basically had their own version of the code for, I don't know, 15 years. So there's never been alternative options for Boulder. And Denver removed it 2 cycles ago.
Okay, so we've got the precedents there. I have not seen a project come through my desk wanting to go through the ASHRAE 90.1, but I certainly could see that happening given what the board is kind of the railroad tracks we're on right now. And, at least we have precedents and we're not the first ones to do it. Besides, we got Denver and Boulder doing it. So I think that's a good idea.
Thanks, Tim. Elizabeth?
Yeah, I can chime in since I do use ASHRAE 90.1 as an alternative to the 2021 IECC now and then. I'll share, I use it more on all electric projects because the 2021 C407, it's energy cost based, and there's a lot of things that you can't claim savings for. And if you're going performance path, and you cannot hit the 20% savings that 2021 IECC requires, and I want that building to stay all electric, I'll use the ASHRAE path. However, I think with the changes that we as a board have been discussing with C407, I would not have need to do that, to go to, use that alternative performance path. So I'm in support of this. I think I may have suggested it in one of my comments anyways, like, hey, you guys want to close this loophole, right? And, from a prescriptive compliance path, if we left this in there, it would be, I don't want to say get out of jail free card, but it would negate all of the work that we have done. So I don't really see a need for it because we've solved the issue where we would have used for performance compliance alternative. So thumbs up from me. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Elizabeth. Okay. I see no other hands, so I'm going to advance us to the straw poll. So this is the question: does the board want to remove the reference to C401.2.2 to allow ASHRAE 90.1 as a compliance pathway? A vote for option A is to support this proposal, removing the reference to ASHRAE 90.1. A vote for option B is no, to keep the reference to 90.1 in the code, and option C is abstain. Yeah, Elizabeth, are you voting? Or
no, sorry, I was just going to add one other comment because I thought of something else. Yeah. Some of the other times that we use ASHRAE as a compliance option is for buildings with high process loads, like healthcare, manufacturing, things like that, where it's difficult to show a percent savings. And I think as long as we're mindful of that when we're creating the or aligning the building performance factors for those building types. Typically process loads, we don't have to achieve savings from process loads. So I think it does still work, but like Anna, when we're doing that, let's just make sure that we've got, options for all of those buildings that might've been tough otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Elizabeth. Okay, board members. Yeah, Tom.
Does anybody know the history as to why the 90.1 path would have been allowed in the past? There has to have been some rationale for including that in the past. I'm just not familiar with why.
Let's just say hope
90,
I might
yeah, 90.1 has been an option for a significant amount of time. The reason for that is because way back when the IECC did not really have a mechanical energy section. So that was handled by 90.1. So if you had a project that was, excuse me, that was a pretty heavy mechanical system that was outside of a single unit being utilized, you would have to go 90.1 because there wasn't provisions within the IECC that was able to address it. Now they're almost one and the same, so the comparability is not as significant as it was a few cycles ago.
So it's an artifact. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, Tim.
Yeah, and to take on to that a little bit from Hope and that history, I recall early on in the earlier versions of the IECC, you used to be able to just use portions of the ASHRAE 90.1. I think as Hope mentioned, that they come through and maybe need to use it on the mechanical or choose to use it, because I think there's an exception for, let's say, for like a vestibule. I don't know if that's still in the 90.1, and they pick and choose a little bit. But then 2 or 3 cycles ago, that went away, and it was if you go 90.1, you use everything, or you got to stay with the IEC. Is that like a true history statement, Hope?
As far as I can recall, you haven't been able to pick and choose, but that might have been in the early 2000s that those editions did allow for that. I think I want to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, Anna, but as of '09, it was all or nothing.
I guess that's dating me a little bit then, because I did recall that from early Energy Code days. Anyways, thank you.
I was just gonna say, to the best of my knowledge, and thinking all the way back to ASHRAE 90.1 2010, it was all or nothing.
Thanks, Anna. Elizabeth?
Yeah, I was going to second that. And Tim, I actually know which project you're talking about because that was one of ours. What we did for that one, you were just kind to the development team that needed to use a semi-heated space category, which existed in ASHRAE, but not in IECC. So you let folks use ASHRAE below the podium and IECC for above the podium. It was a special case, but that's not typically how the code would work. Yeah, it should be, in normal cases, it would be all or nothing. I think that was just kind of a kind concession to make things work out.
Put me on the spot. Thank you.
But you know, that to that point, you know, that semi-heated space category is a big difference between IECC and ASHRAE. It's just you know, one of the amendments that we've proposed around that. That particular challenge, and this is a good point, was around the dropped plenum, the heated plenum in that garage, and the issues around air barriers for that, which is actually why we have proposed that as an amendment here. So maybe we'll get to that soon, but that's why. Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Okay, I'm going to bring us back to the straw poll here. So board members in favor of this proposal voting for option A, please raise your hand. Okay, thanks everyone. I see 11 hands raised. You can lower your hands. Any board members who would not like to accept this proposal voting for option B, please raise your hand. I see no votes for option B. Okay, and any board members who would like to abstain, please raise your hand. Okay, no abstentions. All right, thanks everyone. That's a majority vote to pass this proposal. And we're gonna, just like that, move on to C402. So I think we just have one proposal for C402 and it's Elizabeth's. So Elizabeth, I'm gonna pass it back to you.
That is literally the one I just mentioned. Yes, this is exactly what we just described. I had proposed an exception around, I think this is the air barrier requirement, and Denver has a very similar exception to this. And it's a construction challenge to maintain a continuous air barrier for situations where you have a drop ceiling below a podium, like between a slab and the garage space below, when you're trying to do freeze protection for piping and stuff like that. Engineers do not like to do heat tape, so they prefer to drop a ceiling and insulate that, and then put in like electric unit heaters, which are more resilient, less likely to failure. But typically those dropped ceilings, the suspended ceiling, is an acoustical tile ceiling, which is not an air barrier. So it does not meet the standard IECC, but it's kind of silly to force people to put in, you know, like a drywall ceiling or something in a parking garage. It's just not practical. So Denver created this exception for around the air barrier requirement for suspended ceilings, where they are for freeze protection over a parking garage. But Denver included a few more words here, and this is the words in red that I added, were access to mechanical systems, and maybe it's plumbing as well. And they set a minimum insulation to have that be at least R19, which is what would meet the semi-heated space category in ASHRAE, and that those are supported in a permanent manner, meaning they're pinned, so that if somebody does access the ceiling and they displace the insulation, that insulation is still attached to the ceiling tile and then could be replaced without you know, leaving gaping holes. So that's the intent here. This is really sometimes one of the primary reasons that we may have to use ASHRAE as a compliance pathway, is to get into this. The ASHRAE would allow something like this, and I'd like to build it into the IECC so that we don't have to use ASHRAE. Thanks.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Ron.
Just to be clear, you say it has to add insulation, but is there any air barrier requirement at all?
That would, I think I don't have the whole language here, but yes, the intent here would be that you would not have to meet the air barrier there.
So you would have
with the suspended ceiling.
So you could have like a unfaced fiberglass bat and no air barrier involved.
Correct.
And then be trying to heat on the other side of that space with no air barrier.
Correct.
Interesting.
Which, if you went ASHRAE, you are allowed to do. You are not required to have an air barrier for semi-heated spaces.
I guess I have a little bit of reservation about that. I wasn't aware that that was allowed in ASHRAE, but it's sort of like wearing a wool sweater, a loose knit wool sweater. The wind moves right through it, and you don't really have R19 anymore. So depending upon which kind of insulation they use, it could be very ineffective in that location. So interesting.
And I saw you come off mute. Did you want to add any thoughts here?
Yeah, I just wanted to note that in ASHRAE, there's a strict definition of what a semi-heated space is, and I'm looking up the exact value for the allowed amount of heat per square foot that you can have to be considered a semi-heated space.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't think we have that in here, but I think that's a good idea to add that.
Yeah,
it's like
so
something between, like, is it under 12? It might be by climate zone.
So is the idea that it's just you would limit it to the amount of heat needed for freeze protection, but not really be trying to get that up to full interior temperatures?
Correct.
Yeah. And if when we've metered these, those heating systems really hardly ever do turn on. That space tends to be kept warm from the conditioned space above it, as long as you're not insulating in between those two things. So those spaces don't turn on very often.
So Anna, Elizabeth, just do we want to add language to this proposal before voting for that specific temperature range?
There's the definition for a semi-heated space. I dropped it in the chat, but whose output, it's an enclosed space within a building that is heated by a heating system whose output capacity is greater than or equal to 3.4 BTUs per hour per square foot of floor area, but is not a conditioned space.
And we would have to add or clarify that, because IECC calls, as soon as you put any kind of heat in it, it's conditioned. That it doesn't have, ASHRAE has a specific kBTU per square foot that defines as conditioned because of the semi-heated. I think it's 12. I can look it up real quick. But I think it's and maybe we can just put in a blanket statement that we want to add the condition that meets the ASHRAE definition of semi-heated. And it's going to be a range. It's going to be less than, call it 12 kBTU per square foot, or excuse me, BTUH per square foot. Sorry, I can't talk today.
You're saying a maximum of 12 BTUs.
A maximum, yes.
Tim, did you have
I would say that as long as we're putting a strict cap on the amount of heating that can go into that space, I could see supporting it. I think I wouldn't want to just leave that wide open.
That's reasonable. I agree.
Here is how ASHRAE defines a heated space per climate zone. You're right, they changed it to a per climate zone. I can't put a picture in there.
Oh. Anna, you could grab the screen, or if you want to email it to me, I could pull it up. Tim, did you want to? Okay. Do you want to share your thought here?
Yeah, question. This section that's not in red, that's new in the 24, correct? In its entirety? I was just looking at my 21 and it's not in 402.1. So
yeah, I think this whole section was my suggestion, is because of this exact instance. that causes challenges from just a constructability and maintainability standpoint. And so then this proposal was added, and then I realized, oh boy, we need some more words. And I think maybe we even need more words.
Got it. So the non-red language was brought into the 24.
So
Because
D402.1.3.3 was in the 2024. What we added originally is the exception language that is blue, response to Elizabeth's original proposal.
Got
and
it.
then the red language is now Elizabeth's revised proposal to her own proposal.
Yeah, thank you. But in the 21, there is no section dealing with these.
There's no exception, we should say. That section is there, just not the exception.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we already agreed to add the exception, and I think Elizabeth is just advocating to clarify her exception further.
And
Thank you.
just pulled up on the screen is what Anna emailed me, which is the heated space criteria.
Oh, thank you. Perfect.
Yeah.
So you're correct. It is by climate zone, so we would just need to specify that.
Okay. So
but that's the intent there is those parking garage conditions. It's very difficult to both access things for maintenance purposes and meet the explicit requirements of the IECC around that. So I'm trying to build that in so that we can get rid of the ASHRAE loophole, because this is a construction challenge.
okay, thanks, Elizabeth. Is the board comfortable with the language I added in red, knowing that I am not going to be able to put together a statement that captures all of those heating values that we just talked about? Just this piece right here, adding a condition that the parking garage meets the ASHRAE definition of semi-heated spaces. Is that stated in the right way that the board feels comfortable with? Yeah, Anna.
It's not the parking garage, it's the plenum above the parking garage.
Yeah. That look good?
And we'll work with Anna in those to make sure that the language is good, what we end up with.
Yeah, hopefully that intent makes sense, and then you guys can do the magic wordsmithing. We may have to add something else, and because I'm not sure if this section deals with the air barrier part of that. So I don't know if we could just add a note to make sure that we address that part too, because that's the real goal there.
So would that just be at and addressing something that says addressing or address air barrier?
Yeah, and it may be a different section in C402 around air barriers. Like we may have to add that under a different number.
Okay. For simplicity with this proposal, to make sure we don't layer on too many things here, maybe we do an initial vote here, and then Elizabeth, maybe after the public draft goes out, that's like a proposal that we bring forward again once we figure out where that air barrier piece needs to land. Is that okay?
That sounds great. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, cool. All right, so moving on to our straw poll for this one. Does the board want to amend language in C402.1.3.3 to provide further clarity? So vote for A is yes, accept the proposal. Vote for B is no, do not accept the proposal, and a vote for C is abstain. So with that, we'll do our voting. So board members in favor of option A, please raise your hand. Okay, thanks guys. I see 9 hands raised. You can lower.
I think it got to 10 there at the end.
Oh, it did. Thanks, Adam. Sometimes when I write that number, the extra hands fly up. Board members who would like to vote against this proposal, please raise your hand. Option B. Okay, I see no hands for option B. And board members that would like to abstain, please raise your hand. Okay, awesome. I see 2 abstentions. I'm gonna practice that word. So thanks, that passes with a majority. And we will plug along here to 404. So in our 404 proposals, we have 2 proposals that are for the same section that C404.8.3 covers. And so I'm hoping that you all have had a chance to look at these board proposals. If you haven't, pull up the board proposal document right now and take a look at the difference between the two. It's not that they cannot go together, but it's just that I want you to know that after we vote on one, we will be moving to another one. So the first proposal is from Tim on C404.8.3. Then we have a different proposal on that same section from Elizabeth, and then a final proposal in a different section of C404 from Elizabeth. So Tim, we're going to go ahead and start with yours, and then Elizabeth will move to yours.
Thank you. I've got a feeling where I know this one's going to go, but I'm going to throw it up on the wall. That's a good way to preface my optimism. How's that? I've done a lot of swimming pool permits on commercial and multifamily hotels and multifamily over the last 25 years or so. And the code language, I'm a literal code language person, the way we write code proposals through ICC and then enforce it. And when I have language that says heated pools and permanent spas shall be provided with a cover, and it goes on, and it doesn't say anything about having to use them. So when I do my final inspections, my question is to the contractor, I say, do you have your pool cover here? And the guy looks at me and he goes, yeah, I think we got it over in the storage room over here somewhere. I'll go show it to you. And having a heated pool, which almost every single one of these pools, whether it's outdoor pool for indoor pool, they're all heated and they're open all the time, even on multifamily projects. And I can't tell you, but I don't know if they ever get used. So I don't think this thing belongs in here because it's really just a strange thing to require something to be on site but not be used. I think that's all I have to say, based on my many years of experience doing plan reviews and mostly inspections. I understand the concept totally. But we don't have electric pool covers. We'll see those, it's a different section in the pool code that allows those to be put in place of a pool barrier, but that's not in, really the energy code. It's a different code. So I'm happy for questions and comments, and we'll see how this one goes. Thanks.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, Ron.
So I'm curious, Tim, if would it also satisfy you if we found a way to make sure people were using their pool covers?
Sure, but as I mentioned, almost every one of these pools, they're all heated because it's an amenity, and especially you don't need heat in the summer. So it wouldn't even be used in the summer because it's not going to save. Well, some of them are heated. Sorry, they keep them somewhat heated because of the cool nights. I mean, we're up into the mountain areas too, so I kind of limit myself to the flatland here. But they're not going to use them because they're not electric, and these are pretty good sized pools, and it'd take quite a few staff to roll that out and put it down like you would if you were going to put your swimming pool to bed for the winter. So I thought about that on how you put some kind of language in there that, as Ron, it's got to be enforceable. Conceptual code language is great, but when it comes right down to it, you got to have a building department figure out how to enforce it. Or, the way I enforce it is they show it to me rolled up in a room and they satisfy the code, which I don't think is really what it is. So why have something in there that it's not enforceable?
I just wanted to note really quickly, Ron, on your idea of trying to make sure that they use the covers, that the code is a construction code and not an operations and maintenance code. So you're going to get some pushback.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, Kim.
Just in working with all the municipalities here on everything, climate action plan and greenhouse gas emissions reduction, water conservation, et cetera. There's more than one code mechanism. I feel like there's other places in whether it's municipal code or whatnot that some use of a pool cover could actually be enforced. Now, that wouldn't fall on the building department, that would fall on somebody else at the municipality. But I feel like those options are there, and then that just requires coordination, communication to have that consistency so that the requirement is in the building code, but then the requirement to use it is in a different part of the enforceable code.
Yeah, Tim, jump in. Tim, did you want to jump in, Tim?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I said that softly.
I thought somebody else had their hand up. I would agree there may be different places to put it. We are dealing with the energy code, which is a standalone, the Colorado code, energy code. Putting a code requirement for making someone use it could be put in by a local jurisdiction somewhere. But with the idea that, let's say a multifamily pool, say they want to close it from 2 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock in the morning or something, or 10, whatever. So it's closed for maybe 6 hours. And that would be the time that to be effective and not interfere with people wanting to use the pool. Then you'd have to figure out how you're going to force somebody, let's go get staff to roll this cover over. Certainly it's going to save the, evaporation, save some water and heat. So that's just my point of bringing this up. It's enforceable, non-enforceable language. I should clarify that. We can enforce it. We have been enforcing it, but I'm not sure it's doing any good with what the intent of the Energy Conservation Code is.
Okay. Carolyn, and then we'll go Ron.
Yeah, I mean, just for transparency, I'm not going to support the change. I think for what's alluded to here, we want to make sure that at least at the completion of construction, there's an appropriate cover available for use, and to the extent that it is or is not used, I understand is not something a building code official can enforce. But also we don't want to leave a property without the means of complying should it become something that's enforced. And I think I also just wanted to name that, yes, permanent spas are included in this, which are an even greater concern. And if you don't require their covering, they may not come with an insulated cover. So I just wanted to name that as well.
Thanks, Carolyn. Ron?
Yeah, so I also think it's important that owners of these pools have the ability to cover it. And I guess the other thing I was thinking about was that physical covers are not the only option, right? So there's also chemical additives, the kinds of low density alcohols that are used that people put on top of pools to stop or slow down evaporation, and also slow the cooling that comes with that evaporation, which is really the bigger issue. So it's not the physical cover is not the only option, but I guess I'm like what Caroline just said. I think it's important that the building operator have the device that's made for the pool, so that let's say the homeowners association is concerned about this, they can modify their practices. But if they don't even have the cover, then it becomes this big capital expense or confusion about how they get that cover. It just seems like having it on hand is useful, or at least potentially useful.
Thanks, Ron. Tom?
Yeah, to Ron's point, like I've never seen a cover installed, and we've had a lot better luck getting people to use the liquid pool cover to at least drastically reduce that latent component. I thought I had a proposal that I put into the survey, basically asking if that would be allowed to show that that's on site.
So you did, Tom, and I think that the determination was that the vapor retardant pool cover already covered those types of covers, that it didn't have to necessarily be a physical cover. And so we didn't change the language at all, but accounted for that could include those.
Okay, thanks, Adam. Thanks, Tom. Okay, so I think with those statements said, I think we can move to our board straw poll here. Does the board want to strike this section C404.8.3 covers entirely? Option A is yes to strike this section. Option B is no to keep it, and option C is abstain. So board members in favor of striking this section, option A, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 0 hands in support of this proposal. Any board members who would like to vote against this proposal, option B, please raise your hand. All right, we got 12 for option B. Thank you, guys. I think that's everybody, but I'll just triple check. Anyone who would like to abstain, please raise your hands. And Kate, I think I saw you vote for option B. Is that correct? Is that a lingering hand?
Sorry. Yes,
Okay.
it was B.
Okay, great. Okay, so 0 votes for abstain. So this proposal fails. Okay, we're gonna move on to the second proposal for this section, which is from Elizabeth. So Elizabeth, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, the original wording of this, I don't know if we could possibly bring that up. The original wording referred to outdoor heated pools and outdoor permanent spas. And somehow the word outdoor was deleted. And I am proposing to put it back because I don't think there is any value in having covers for indoor pools when the temperature of the water is virtually the same as the temperature of the air. There really is no energy savings potential. And then you just have this giant cover for these giant pools that take up a giant amount of space and they will never be used. And there really isn't any value in those for indoor pools. Thank you.
And just noting that
Thanks,
outdoor was removed through survey results that was proposing that pool covers be required for all pools. So that's why the words outdoor were struck. So just noting that.
And Elizabeth, just do you want to speak for a moment to the exception as well before we open it up to board questions, comments?
This is another thing that was there originally. I think the 2024, the straight ICC code says we're more than 75% of the energy of not fewer than 3 calendar months is from a heat pump or on-site renewable energy system, then covers shall not be required. And that was also struck. And that I didn't quite understand why that would be struck, because to me that actually could be an incentive for someone to take that step to go to a heat pump type of system over a gas system. So I'm sort of any way we can encourage people to use heat pump pool heating equipment is a good thing. So I would recommend we put that back.
Okay, thanks, Elizabeth. Carolyn, I see your hand up, so we'll go to you first.
Yeah, question for Elizabeth on the indoor. I think one of the nuances here is that it's both pools and spas. And so in your proposal, I think you may be correct, like the argument can be made around the pool, but not necessarily the spa, which is going to be rejecting heat into the space at a higher rate, right? So spas are typically operated over 100. So in like summer months, it's going to be rejecting heat into a conditioned space. So I was just curious if in your proposal you consider modifying to just the pool.
I mean, if that was the compromise we needed to make, I mean, I think that the energy difference is very small. I don't ever see indoor covers being used in the same way we use them for outdoor spas. Again, it's just not there's a little bit difference in temperature, of course, but not nearly as much as when it's outdoor.
Okay, thanks. And then just as a comment rather than question, I mean, I tend to agree with Elizabeth on this idea of trying to encourage use of heat pumps. But I think we also have this challenge of, first cost of construction and how expensive is it to include a pool cover? And is the ability to exclude that going to drive somebody to include a heat pump? Like, I just don't understand that the two are necessarily so interrelated in terms of financial decisions. So is there anything you can speak to on that. Like, I don't see my ability to not have to provide somebody a pool cover as to make me think that I want to go with the heat pump.
All I was proposing here is we're restoring the original language of this. Like, this is how the IECC reads right now. And then, and it seemed like there was a chance to encourage heat pump use by saying, well, you know, if it's a very efficient system, you don't have to have a cover. I don't know. I mean, I'm not totally sold on that if that's a deal breaker for folks. Kim, maybe this could be separated if people feel strongly about one versus the other.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's hear out the rest of the comments and then we'll kind of figure out how we want to modify. So Kim and then Hope.
I guess I'll go to my comment on the exception first. I'm kind of in agreement with Carolyn that I'm not sure that the cost involved in installing a heat pump is comparable to not having the requirement for a cover. So I'm not sure that not having a cover is enough of an incentive or necessarily quite the related decision making for that. And then I guess a question, I've seen indoor pool covers and spas being covered. So, and I also would think that there's a moisture content issue and controlling that moisture. And the more of that gets into the air, that then the more mechanical equipment has to run to dehumidify a space. So to me, it makes sense to have covers, whether it's indoor or outdoor.
Okay, thanks, Kim. Hope, I'll go over to you.
Yeah, I appreciate, Kim, you bringing up the evaporation concept, because that is part of the reason why that was placed in there. Not necessarily energy-wise, it's you have the escape of moisture out of that structure. And so then you are, one, replacing it with more water, which in turn you're then utilizing more heat to heat that water to replace the evaporation. But I wanted to kind of point out about the exception, just so the board is fully aware of the situation. When we talk about outdoor pools and spas, or indoor pools and spas, the energy code is not the code that necessarily is charging as to how those will be implemented. There is the International Swimming Pool and Spa Code, and they have an energy section. And I will say what's in the energy section of the pool and spa does not always match what's necessarily within the energy code. So while you might omit it here, it still will reside within the International Swimming Pool and Spa Code. The other thing is this exception here is located within the energy pool and spa codes, their energy section. So when it's omitted here, it may still kick into play because it'll partially be at the swimming pool and spa code. And I believe that I do not believe that in the 24 edition, the addition of the heat pump was added in that particular edition. So this exception, as Elizabeth has written it, for sure would incorporate the idea of a heat pump being able to meet the requirements of the exception. Just wanted to throw it out there so everybody is fully aware that the energy code is not the code that most people look to when it comes to pools and spas.
Thanks, Hope. That's really helpful. Any other thoughts or questions from that? Yeah, Tim.
Yeah, thank you. I just pulled up the 24 pool code, and in section, let me just find it, section 303.1.3, where it says covers, it's the exact same language that's in the 24 IECC with the exception, but it says outdoor, not indoor. So it says the pool code says outdoor heated pools and outdoor permanent spas with the vapor retardant, and then the exception is what's there.
Okay, so thanks, Tim.
That
So
would
this is
actually,
the exact language in the 2024 pool code.
yep. So what is being proposed here would be good because then it aligns with the 24 pool code exactly. So that's why I would vote for this one, just to keep the, as Hope said, we want to make sure the codes are the same. Thanks.
Thanks, Tim. Okay.
I can throw out one other thing just on the exception itself. I doubt this would ever occur in our Colorado climate zones 4, 5, and 6, because I don't think equipment exists where we could have more than 75% of the energy for heating coming from a heat pump, unless that pool is operating in summer only. And I think maybe that's why this exception is here. Like you could do this in Phoenix, sure, but I don't know that you can even do this in Colorado if you're heating that pool in the winter. So this seems to me like this would be for when you have a pool with a heat pump system that is operating in summer only. If you tried to operate that pool in the winter, you would have to have electric resistance, and then you would not meet the exception, just FYI.
It does say or on-site renewable energy. So if on-site renewable energy was feeding that electric resistance system, then it would still be accepted, as far as I'm reading.
I don't think that would be feasible, and you have to have battery storage and things. Yeah, I don't think that could happen.
We actually have at least one pool that's heated like that. It's not an air source heat pump, it's a ground source heat pump system, but they are heating that thing year round.
Okay, great.
Yeah, monster of a system.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. Great comments and great discussion. I think I'm going to move us to the straw poll and the for time's sake. So Elizabeth, I think maybe reading between the lines, keeping these together as one proposal feels like. Does that feel like what you would like to propose is keeping these two?
Oh, I might defer to the board. Do people feel like it should be split?
I keep them together for the consistency issues raised earlier.
I personally would vote for one, but not the other.
Well, why don't then we separate them, because we might find that one passes and the other doesn't, or we might find that they both pass. But that way we can just keep ourselves. How do I do that? There we go. Moving forward.
Hand up. Is there?
Sorry, what'd you say, Carolyn?
It's just Hope has her hand up.
I think that was left over, but Hope, if you have anything you'd like to add. Okay. Yeah, Tim, go for it.
Yeah, so this is going to be a question for a jurisdiction and maybe my lawyer attorney. So we typically will adopt the pool code in the package, which I'm going to be doing with this updated energy code. So let's say only the outdoor language gets put in and then the exception doesn't go in, or vice versa, but the pool code is staying the same. And I've adopted both. Now I've got an inconsistency, and that is not good for jurisdictions. So I just want to throw that on the table, that it's got to be consistent for enforceability and from a legal standpoint. So just my opinion.
I would also note too that the 2024 IECC says, where conflicts occur between provisions of this code and reference codes and standards, the provision of this code shall apply, being the energy code. The pool code does not say the same. So in theory, this would say the energy code prevails over the pool code in a case of conflict. I don't think that necessarily negates what you're saying about consistency, but I just wanted to point that out.
Good point. Thank you.
And I think maybe we can just, that's a really great note, Tim, for the board as they look at voting. But we can just let the sort of folks share their thoughts via vote. Yeah, Kim, did you have anything else to add?
I just wanted to add too that I'm not sure that all jurisdictions adopt the pool code. I know we have pools here, but I've never seen the pool code before in all my years in working with the building department. So I could be incorrect with that, but I'm not sure that it's a universally adopted code.
There are a lot of jurisdictions that do not adopt the full code. I can.
Yeah,
It's a fairly new book. It's only been around, I think, since the 2018 cycle.
Okay. All right, thanks guys. So I'm gonna move us ahead with these two proposals. So the first one is to add in the word outdoor to C404.8.3, these two additions we see here. And then the second proposal will be to reinstate the exception. Okay. So starting straw poll, does the board want to revise C404.8.3 to apply to outdoor pools? Option A is yes, option B is no, option C is abstain. Board members in favor, option A, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 6 hands raised for option A. You guys can lower your hands. If board members would not like to include the word outdoor in that section, vote is option B for no. Please raise your hand. All right, that is 6 options, or 6 votes for option B. And any board members that would like to abstain, please raise your hand. Okay, that's 0 abstains. So that is a straight majority. That is a 50-50 vote. So per the book, that does not pass. And so we will, the proposal to add the words outdoor failed, and we will move forward without those 2 words. Carolyn. Oh, you're muted.
You're muted.
Sorry, thanks, Kim. I realize I agree with your interpretation. I just realized this is probably the first time that we have kind of this double proposal going on, where we originally through survey voted to modify the base code, and then this proposal was to restore the base code. The original survey passed, but the proposal to modify it back didn't, because it didn't have a majority. So just naming that as just making sure that we're clear on like how that ultimately gets dispositioned. I think eventually we have to pass the code, and that's where it particularly matters. But I just realized that I don't think we've had this situation occur where we.
So Carolyn, to clarify, the board voted in majority to remove the words outdoor. And then that vote to me was just reinforced right now from not getting a majority. So I do think.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. We'll move on to the vote about to reinstate the exception to C404, 0.8.3. So board members that would like to reinstate this exception, option A is yes, option B is no, and option C is abstain. Tim, is that a question or a vote? Hand.
I had a question from what you just said about the original survey. Do you have the records of showing how many voted each way on that? Because I think at that point we had quite a few more members voting versus now we're dwindling.
We do have all of the original records. If you guys are interested, we could send those that polling out. And I will say, while the full board was asked to take that survey, the full board did not take all of those surveys. And so we used a simple majority in those surveys based on who took the survey. So to be fully transparent, you know, we were dealing with the data that we got, and we had to make some decisions based on that data and who took the survey. So from those who took the survey, and I'd have to go back, it's been a while now, but we can certainly pull that and share it. Of those that took this original survey, the majority voted in favor of removing those words outdoor when we asked them about it in the survey. Okay. And so you guys know, like Adam and I can send you guys any of the data or any of these votes at any time if you have questions or want to know more. We just don't want to inundate you guys with a bunch of survey results, but happy to share anything and very transparent in what we've been putting together here.
And just reiterating that the only votes that count are the ones at the very end of the process. Just everybody remember this. Everything between now and then, that's why we're calling them straw polls, because they are intended to provide direction to our team on how to move forward. But none of this counts until we vote at the end. So if the board votes the other way at the end, then that's what counts, not any of what just happened. Just keep that in mind.
Thanks, Adam. Okay, so to the straw poll on the slide, board members in favor of reinstating the exception, option A, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 6 votes for option A. You guys can lower your hands. Vote no to not reinstate this exception. Please raise your hand if you'd like to vote no on this proposal. Okay, I see 5 hands raised. You guys can lower your hands. And if any board members would like to abstain, please raise your hand. Okay, and Jesse just dropped off, which is why we now have a simple majority that won that vote. And so we will move forward with reinstating the exception, since that was a vote score of 6-5 on that. And welcome, Brad. So now we're back to 12 board members. Jesse dropped, Brad's joined us. All right.
Wait, make Brad vote on that.
Brad, I'm not gonna put you on the spot. Okay, but right in time for this next proposal. So Elizabeth, I will pass it over to you to talk through your other 404 proposal.
Yeah, this is just a clarification in language, and I'm not even sure what was intended here. Could we look at the language? Here we go. The language around demand responsive water heating, only because I know engineers will ask us when this says electric storage water heaters, if it, usually when we say electric storage, the industry means electric resistance. And I want to clarify that the board means electric resistance and heat pump. Or if that's not what the board means, to then clarify it as electric resistance. So that's the first part. Second part is just clarifying that exception that many water heaters can provide a water heater delivery temperature of 180 degrees or greater. And we wanted to clarify the exception is only for water heaters that are required to provide a constant water delivery temperature of 180 degrees or greater.
Okay, thank you.
So
Elizabeth.
the first part is more of a question. Does the red text reflect what the board intended with this language, or was it intended only for electric resistance storage water heaters?
Carolyn, yeah, jump in if you've got thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think the electric resistance component is the.
Sorry? Not in a while.
I said, I think the electric resistance component is the reason for the desire for the demand responsive, but I'm unaware of heat pump water heaters that don't include electric resistance elements. So I think it's fine to include this, but that's just my sense. Most of them are hybrid, so have the ability to operate in heat pump mode or in electric resistance mode for recovery purposes. So I guess in that sense, we would want them to be able to be managed, but I think the most important part is for electric resistance, full electric resistance heaters. So I don't have a strong feeling, I guess is maybe what I would say, but I don't know that it needs, I didn't know it would need the clarity, so.
Okay, thanks, Carolyn. Elizabeth, any thoughts or any other board members with thoughts on this one?
And I guess I also have a question of, is that capability available with heat pump water heaters? I'm not sure. I looked for some and didn't see any right off the bat, but sorry, it was very late at night when I was doing this. Usually when we see this, it's intended, as Carolyn said, for electric resistance water heaters. Not specifically for heat pump water heaters, but the fact that it just says electric storage is it's just going to be a question for design teams about what is intended here. So I figured we might as well clarify it.
Yeah, I'm just, it's an interesting, thanks for raising it, Elizabeth. I mean, I think maybe that's an ask for the team to verify that. Sorry, small four-legged children are squeaking toys. I mean, I think that they are, but I do think it could be a barrier to heat pump water heaters by requiring this, so.
And I believe this was this is not part of the original IECC. This is our amendment. So I think this can just be something that we want to discuss and clarify as well.
To note, it's our amendment, but the language was taken from the IECC appendix directly. So it's not our language, but it is our amendment to choose to add it into the base code.
Got it. Thank you. Then in that case, maybe Hope, do you know what was intended by that in the original appendix? Oh, I see Hope says she's looking for her notes.
Yeah, Hope, if you want a moment to check your notes, maybe I'll go to Kim and then we'll circle back to Hope.
Yeah, that would be great. I'm trying to get to them. Thank you.
I was just going to say that I'm in support of this. I mean, unless for some reason our technical support team identifies that heat pump water heaters do not have demand responsive controls, but my understanding is that they do and that they work well with them, just like a regular electric resistant water tank.
Okay, thanks, Kim. Hope, did you find your notes?
No, my apologies. I'm looking at a different flash drive.
Oh, okay, no worries. Tim, we'll go to you.
Yeah, I just Googled up Home Depot and they sell a bunch of Rheem heat pump water heaters. So if Home Depot sells it, it's got to be okay.
With the demand response.
Well, I didn't go into that detail. I didn't look at the specifics.
I will note that I'm looking at an ACEEE did a big report on heat pump water heaters and noted that many are made with demand response capability.
But it seems to me like a good clarification to add that in.
Okay. Brad, did you want to comment on that as well?
Yeah, I was just going to provide commentary that Adam just provided. So there are A.O. Smith, Rheem, all offer demand responsive capabilities. So there are offerings.
Okay.
And then I think if we need to skip this and come back for Hope, I think this is an important question because if electric storage water heaters really was only supposed to be electric resistance and not heat pump, then I don't know that we could make that more stringent if that's not what the appendix meant. So if we want to jump and come back.
Okay. Hope, I'll check with you one more time if you had any thoughts or notes on this one.
I do, but I can't seem to be able to get to them right on the spot like this. But
sorry.
No. I've been having laptop issues today, so it just is fitting that it's continuing right now. I do recall that concern because it's all of a sudden it's electric resistance and heat pump water heaters, and it sounds like it's really, really specific, as if those are the only ones that would be included in this requirement and not necessarily broad reaching as far as where this could come into play. So I don't know if that was the intent that you were wanting to accomplish with this.
My intent was really to clarify what the code meant by electric storage water heaters. I know my plumbing engineer friends, if they read that, they will assume that that means electric resistant storage water heaters. They would assume that heat pump water heaters were not lumped into that, even though they use electricity. I know it doesn't really make sense, but that's just how they are thought of. So if that's not what's intended here, I wanted to add this clarification, which is the red text. But if that's, if this was written not intending heat pump water heaters, I think we need to clarify that as well.
Yeah, I don't recall that it was just a one size fits all. My concern with the specifying basically these two is by the time this comes into play, there may be an additional type of equipment that could fall under this, but you are only specifying electric resistance and heat pump water heaters. And because of that, all end users, that's what they'll latch onto. They won't latch onto this other type of material or equipment or appliance that could fall under these specific or this type of a requirement. So when you get really specific like this, that's what code officials and that's what a lot of end users will latch onto.
Is there a better way to say this then? Maybe like instead of saying electric storage water heaters, if we say storage water heaters that use electricity as their fuel source? And then the second question is, do you think that's what they meant?
Yeah, I'm not sure that that's necessarily what they meant, but I could see where you're coming from with it. But if you, I personally, I wouldn't leave the language as is, how the red language that you have in there. Your suggestion of saying, electric or storage water heaters that utilize electric would probably be more, if you're trying to be more inclusive, might be to that extent. But I mean, you're talking about a storage water heater and yeah, excuse me.
I would also, Elizabeth, I would just offer that, around your concern regarding whether or not that heat pump water heaters were meant to be accounted for there, I think what we could do is the board could vote on what they think is the right thing to do here. And if we determine at some later date that, well, all that was meant there was storage, like resistant storage water heaters, we can evaluate it then. But I think it's also a little bit difficult to understand what was intended versus what it says, right? That's we may never know what was intended, but we can only read what it says, right? And so I think, to me, it seems like so we can move forward with this is to, rather than worrying about whether or not that was intended, if we learn that that was a different intent than what we read it as, we can always adjust later. But if the board thinks that it's good to make this clarification now, I would suggest we vote on it.
Yeah, and keep in mind, this was a 2-year process. So what the intent was on day one shifted by the time the last final vote came through. So.
Okay.
So maybe I can revise my proposal then. I like how you have the language here. My proposal is that we clarify that it's intended to include all storage water heaters that use electricity. How about that?
Okay, I'm going to throw a little wrench into it. So my guess water heater uses electricity, not to heat the water.
Not as his fuel source.
So
Right.
maybe we need to further clarification.
Good point.
So all storage water heaters that use electricity for water heating.
Yeah.
Yes.
There you go.
Just as a heads up, this is like one of the worst things code officials hate is the wordsmithing that happens on the dais because people haven't had time to think about the correct way to do it. And you end up getting a mess. Probably this is, a prime example of that.
Well, the great thing is that this is not our last chance to hit this. So if someone finds that it's bad, we can always readdress it again.
Okay, I think I lost, you guys were coming in a little soft sound wise on my end, so I lost what change we want to make to that first red text.
Use electricity for water heating.
Okay, thank you.
And I think, Kim, while Elizabeth said all storage water heaters, I don't think we should say all because it specifies right after that which water heaters have to apply.
Got it. Storage water. Yep, there you go.
Okay. Lovely. Tim?
I have a question about the next little section, if we're ready to go there yet.
Yeah, let's jump there.
Okay, and with that, and Elizabeth, you can maybe answer that. So would that typically apply to, say, water heaters in a commercial kitchen, maybe? I don't know what health departments require for, the minimum hot water, but is that the concept of what?
That's kind of what I was thinking there. If something is required for sanitation reasons, I don't know. I didn't want there to be potential health and safety issues.
Yeah.
Uh-oh, I think Tim froze on my end.
He froze here
No,
too.
you got us answered.
Okay.
We say thank you.
And that's why I added those words that are required to and provide a constant, like we're 180 degrees, that we have to have it all of the time, no matter what.
Okay.
And I'm not even sure how many situations there would be, but someone will think of something.
Any other comments or questions on the second part of the proposal, the language and the exceptions? Okay. I am not seeing any. And so with that, I think, let's see, I'm just going to say, want to accept the proposed language to C 404, what was it, 10. Just to keep things simple. Okay. Oh, Tim, you're back, and I see your hand is up again. Did you have more you wanted to add?
No, I lost my internet here, and now I'm trying to take my hand down.
No worries. I see two of you now. So it looks like, and now you're gone and your hand is down. So I think we're good.
Yeah, I just lowered your other hand. So.
I've been cloned.
All right. So straw poll here. Vote for A is yes to accept this. The language that we modified on slide 40 here. And an option B is no, to not accept that language. Option C is to abstain. So we will go ahead and do our voting. Board members in favor of option A, raise your hand. All right, thank you guys. I see 11 votes for option A. You can lower your hands. Votes for option B to not accept this proposal, please raise your hand.
Adam, make the other Tim vote no, just for fun.
Carolyn, that would be playing with the survey results. Option C, abstain. Any board members like to abstain?
I think it's vote early and vote often. That was some term I learned in Chicago a long time ago.
All right, Tom, I got you for the abstain. Thank you. So that's 11 votes for accepting this proposal, 0 votes against it, and 1 abstain. So this proposal will pass. All right, so we have 9 minutes left. Elizabeth, how are you feeling about pitching this proposal in the last 9 minutes, or should we maybe?
Sure. Yeah,
okay.
we can throw this out. And this is kind of back from my days as a lighting consultant, lighting designer, and just understanding the importance of light levels for a functional space. I'm so sorry. I just realized I was muted. I apologize. So yeah, this goes back to my days as a lighting consultant, and knowing that the industry has a lot of concerns about reduction in functionality when light levels are reduced. Schools are a big one, and it's been proven a lot that certain light levels are really needed for student attention and occupant energy levels and things like that. So I know the industry does feel strongly about that kind of situation. So I added this suggestion for an additional exception at the end to allow a little flexibility here if people feel really strongly that they could make a case where health, safety, or productivity of occupants could be compromised by light level reductions. I realize this is a little bit vague, so it would probably be at the onus of the designer to try to prove that, and at the allowance of the AHJ to permit it. But I did want to leave a little flexibility here. Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Adam, I saw your hand up, so we'll go to you first.
I was just going to ask Elizabeth, based on what you just said and the fact that I also agree that it's kind of potentially far reaching, that anyone could make the argument. I'm wondering if we could amend your language just to say as approved by the code official at the end, just so that it's really clear that they have the ultimate say as to which of those arguments lands.
That's a great idea, Adam. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Adam. Ron?
I just like to clarify, because when I read the text, it's talking not about lighting levels, but about having demand responsive controls. So it doesn't seem like there's anything in having demand controls that actually reduces or requires the reduction in lighting levels in any circumstance.
That's what they will do, though. If you put in demand responsive controls and the utility applies a demand response, it will dim the lights.
I see. So you're talking about utility. Oh, I see. These are demand responsive controls that would be potentially controlled by the utility, and they might dim them.
Right.
Yeah,
if you actually have a demand response program, that they will dim the lights during a peak demand event.
Got it. Okay. I'm with you. I like the addition.
Thanks, Ron. Tim?
I'm not familiar with how that program works from the utility, but what level would they be able to reduce it to? And the only reason I'm asking is it's minimum requirements in the International Building Code for, foot candle, minimum foot candle in basic areas, 1 foot candle, or if you start getting into some of the exit.
Yeah, it's a good question. The intent is for it to be relatively small, like 10%, 20%, but there are going to be spaces where you are perhaps designing to that egress light level, and dimming 10% or 20% is not acceptable. In classrooms, dimming 20% is noticeable. That may not be sufficient or may not be acceptable. And because I think you make a great point there that isn't a defined thing, and utilities may be messing around with that in future years, that there's a risk there.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm not sure adding any kind of pointer language back to the IBC chapter 10, in particular, what section do I have open? 1008.2.1 is particular, or 1008.2, to not reduce more than that section allows, just so we correlate back with that. I don't know if that makes sense.
All of the target light levels for different space types in like the IESNA handbook are really difficult to read nowadays. It's not just a flat foot candle level. It has to do with there's pages and pages and pages of data here. So it wouldn't be easy to put that all in there as far as the productivity requirements of light levels. So this is why I was kind of leaving it sort of intentionally vague, but for someone who felt really strongly that that there was health, safety, or productivity concerns around those types of dimming response, could utilize this exception.
Yeah, so maybe just adding that extra language somebody else suggested of as approved by the AHJ, the building official, that would give us the opportunity to review that request and then cross-check.
Yeah, have somebody would then have to make the case to you, rather than you making the case for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Ron and Brad, I see you guys both, and I'm going to ask to keep your comments brief just because we're running up on time, and I want to do one little wrap up before after this conversation. So
Sure. I'm just looking at this text and thinking that it would require like a school to install the demand responsive controls, but I'm not sure there's anything that would compel that school to participate in the utilities demand response program. So couldn't they just avoid these reductions by just not participating with the utility in the demand response program, even if the hardware is there?
I think so, but then why would we force them to spend the extra money?
No, it's a good point. I think there is potentially an out of actually dimming in those portions. But you're right.
And Ron, I'll say from some of the demand responsive programs we see up here, there's real cost savings that can be earned if you dial back your energy use during peak times. And so I could see a school with a limited operations budget being interested in something like that from a cost saving perspective.
Yeah.
Brad?
Yeah, I want to speak for every utility, but in Fort Collins, we have a demand responsive program for water heaters and for thermostats. And it is an opt-in program that even allows people that are participating in the program to opt out of demand response at certain times. Let's say they've got family coming in, they don't want to reduce water heating use. So most programs allow the users to opt out if they want. So I just want to make that clear to everybody, like even if they're part of the program, participants have the ability to opt out and maybe say, we don't want to reduce lighting within these areas at these times of the day.
Yeah, and my thinking there is that the people who operate the building may not realize that, what is the critical light level. Like they're not running around with the light meters saying, oh, these are egress levels. We can't dip below here in this hallway, but we can in that hallway. I want to leave the option open to the designer to ensure that the integrity of the building operation is protected if it needs to be.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Carolyn, last quick thought on this?
Yeah, I was just going to note, I think with the addition of as approved by the code official, kind of resolves a lot of this. I think the case would need to be made and the jurisdictional context could be considered. So I'm comfortable with this change.
Okay. Thanks, Carolyn. So I think because we've had a good discussion on this, I'm going to ask for a straw poll before you guys sign off. We will go ahead and vote on this change. Option A is yes, we like the change. Option B is no, we don't want to add that seventh exception. Option C is abstain. So if you'd like to vote to approve this proposal, please raise your hand. Option A. All right, that was 12 hands for yes. You guys can lower. Any votes for no? If board members would like to vote no, please raise your hand now. Adam, I think that's a leftover hand. Okay, so no votes for no. And if any board members would like to abstain, please raise your hand. All right, 0 abstains. So this passes. Thank you guys, right at the final hour. So amazing. We only have 2 more proposals to get through. We didn't get through today. That's C406 and C503. So next steps, our next meeting is December 12th, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. We will wrap up our conversation on commercial code proposals, and we will start beginning residential code proposals. Huge, huge, huge reminder. We're about to go into Thanksgiving week. You guys will have a lot of downtime. What's better in your downtime than reviewing the residential code and giving me proposals? I can't think of anything. So please make sure you review the residential code. Send Adam and I proposals, 8 a.m. December 2nd. We're really going to be strict about that deadline because we have a very short time window to turn around those proposals, get them formatted, get them to you guys with enough time to review before the meeting. So please stay on task and on time with that ask. And the rest of my slide, So, and that's the sort of typical messages. So with that, I will let you guys go. We only went a minute over. Nice work, team. Have a great rest of your week and happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks everyone.
You too.